Good morning, everyone. I'm Rich Robledo, your 2022 MLS chair. I've got Steve K and Deanne Rebarowitz from IDAR. We are going to go over today ADA website issues. Kind enough to meet Deanne last week at the NAR conference and came to find out that she used to be our counsel between 2005 and 2013. And then she got a promotion to National Association of Realtors. And it's absolute dynamite. I'm looking forward to getting some of these questions answered. Thanks for coming on, Deanne.
Thank you so much for inviting me today.
So our first question, as real estate professionals, we're aware of the American with Disabilities Act in terms of physical locations like offices and apartment buildings. Why are we talking about websites and why is that important?
Right. So that's a great question. So the ADA, American with Disabilities Act, as real estate professionals, you know, it was passed in 1990 and you're aware that public accommodations, like you said, offices, apartment buildings, hotels, retail shops, they all need to be in compliance with the ADA. So we see that with ramps for, accessibility. We see that with Braille in elevators and the strobe lights on fire alarms, for people who can't hear. So we're all really familiar with those kind of physical space accommodations under the ADA. But what is a little bit less known, and I have I'm going to share my screen here real quick.
Thank you.
I just have a little snippet of the ADA. So it's Title III of the ADA, and it talks about places of public accommodation, ensuring effective communication with individuals with disabilities by providing them with auxiliary services. So that's where it's starting to kind of bleed into the website sphere, because more and more business is being conducted online. And you know this, in your profession with buyers and sellers. And over time, those accessibility requirements have, begun to extend beyond those physical spaces, but there are still a lot of questions about this. But it really has become a major issue, and that's why we're talking about it today. So physical, the application to physical spaces, 100%. This applicability to non-physical spaces and websites is becoming more of an issue, and we'll talk more about what we're starting to see as we go through today.
Great. Steve?
Awesome. Well, yeah. So my question would be the Department of Justice, where do they stand on whether websites need to be ADA compliant? I'm kind of confused on it, and I'm not sure. Hopefully you can shed light on that one.
Yeah. So the Department of Justice, or the DOJ, they're the federal agency that's responsible for enforcing the American with Disabilities Act. And for many years, they were silent on, any kind of concrete regulation. So typically, when we have a government agency like the Division of Real Estate that you're all familiar with, right there in Nevada, we're used to seeing sort of regulations that help implement statutes, right? So it's a regulatory process that all agencies go through, whether it's the state or in this case, the federal level, but there weren't any regulations from the Department of Justice. But they did say, so their position for many years has been all websites need to be accessible, period, end of story. But they hadn't provided any guidance for what that actually means. So we've got Title III of the ADA passed in 1990. I'm pretty sure that was before websites were a common thing, they just weren't around, right? Certainly not to the extent that we have them today for business. And it just wasn't around. So there's no reference to websites in the actual statute. So that's where we would expect an agency to come in with some regulations, and the DOJ hasn't done that. They've just said, again, for years, all websites need to be accessible, period, without further guidance.
So these DOJ guidelines are recent. What was happening before that?
You mentioned the DOJ guidelines. So in March of this year, they finally came out and said something. They're not regulations. So they didn't go through a regulatory process like I was just describing, but they did issue guidance. in March of 2022, and that the URL is on the screen, and I can provide you a link to add to your show notes if you'd like. But basically what this guidance says, it's a list of resources and some guidance, but it says businesses have flexibility. So again, no clear, concise, regulations, but businesses have flexibility to make their websites accessible, to provide effective communication and ensure non-discrimination against people with disabilities. So again, websites have to be accessible, not clear, a few resources mentioned in their guidance. But what was happening before then was basically the lawyers were involved. So thousands of websites filed over the years, and the plaintiff's bar was basically suing businesses, everything from huge multinational corporations to small businesses across industries. Kind of no one was exempt, claiming that their websites, and I want to point out mobile apps as well. So we're talking about both websites and mobile apps in many cases, that they weren't in compliance with the ADA. And so what we have is a sort of patchwork of court decisions on whether the ADA actually applies to websites. And another reason we're talking about this today is that the litigation hasn't stopped. So in fact, there was a 14% increase in ADA litigation from 2020 to 2021. And now that we've got a little bit of guidance from the DOJ, something's better than nothing, let's face it, at least we've got them saying something. I don't anticipate that those numbers are going to go down. I think we'll still continue to see litigation.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a big thing. Everybody wants to sue everybody, right?
For sure.
But with that being said, how are the courts dealing with this? With the question of ADA applying to websites, how are they handling it, I guess?
So there's what we call a split of authority. So that's kind of a legal term of art, meaning there are different circuits of the federal court system. So since we're dealing with a federal statute, these litigation cases have come up in federal court. So we have a split of authority. One of the cases that's kind of set the bar, this case came out a couple of years ago. It is in the Ninth Circuit. So I want to point out this one in particular because Nevada is in the Ninth Circuit. And this is, again, kind of set the bar in terms of, ADA website accessibility, at least in the Ninth Circuit. And that is, don't wait for DOJ guidance. Websites need to be accessible. And the Ninth Circuit in this Domino's case, Robles versus Domino's, said that the existing guidance already articulates comprehensive standards that require full and equal access to disabled consumers, and basically said you have to bring it into compliance. Now, this court, and this will come up time and again when we're talking about ADA website accessibility, they refer to the WCAG 2.0 standards, and we can talk more about that and what that means. But here we have a court saying, absolutely, don't wait for DOJ guidance. WCAG 2.0 standards, it's very clear. On the other hand, just last year in the 11th Circuit, so a different federal circuit, and that's where we get this split, a different court in the Gill versus Winn-Dixie case looked at the actual verbiage of that ADA Title III that we talked about in the very beginning and said, look, they talk about 12 places, and each one of these places is a physical place of accommodation. So the 11th Circuit has said, we don't think the ADA applies to websites. They're not a place of public accommodation as that has been defined in the statute that we're talking about. And in this particular case, in addition to that, Winn-Dixie's particular website was not an intangible barrier. So this had to do with refilling drug prescriptions. And because the consumer had to go to the physical space, which was ADA compliant to complete their request to fulfill a prescription, that even gave the court more, foundation to say, look, the ADA does not apply to this website. So that's kind of where we stand in terms of court. Unclear if the U.S. Supreme Court is going to address this sort of split of authority between the districts that the circuits that say, yes, absolutely, ADA applies, and the districts or circuits that say, no, ADA does not apply to websites.
So with the split opinion on the ADA definition, what's the takeaway for us with those conflicting court cases?
Yeah, so I think with Nevada being in the Ninth Circuit, again, that Robles versus Domino's case would be, considered what we call controlling law in the Ninth Circuit for now. So the DOJ's position regarding website accessibility between that and the Robles decision, the safe bet is to make your websites accessible at the very least to prevent any intangible barriers to full and equal access of your services. But again, unfortunately, there's no clear guidance in the ADA or from the DOJ, although they did provide some resources and ideas on how to make websites accessible.
Okay. So basically, if we have a website for our business, it has to be ADA accessible. What is accessible website? What does it look like, right? What does that actually mean? And how does it function? How do I know that my website's accessible or if it's not?
Right. So, and again, I'm certainly not a tech person. I am not a website developer. I have read the WCAG 2.0 and now 2.1 standards, and I understand some of it, and some of it is just very, very technical. But generally speaking, your website should address individuals with disabilities and provide alternative means of consuming content. So what that means is, for example, for a blind person, there are screen readers that blind people use to access websites. So your website should be compatible with a screen reader. There should be alternative images, or alternative text for images that actually describe the image. Properly labeled form fields if you have forms on your websites. Keyboard only access. So, not using a mouse, actually using a keyboard to navigate the web page, and audio descriptions for videos. So again, what's happening in the video. So they can hear the audio and then hear, the conversation that's going on in the video, but then audio descriptions of what's happening in terms of images on the screen. And then for people with low vision, it could be things like being able to increase the font size, color contrast. For people who are deaf or hard of hearing, captions for all of your audio content. So any kinds of videos or, MP3 files that are on your website, video tours, things of that nature would have captions if there's audio on there. And then again, keyboard access, the ability to slow down or turn off timeouts. So maybe there's sliders on your homepage. So the ability to turn off, that feature of it automatically forwarding. And then for people with epilepsy, no flashing content. So, if there's, a flashing aspect or an image or, a GIF or something of that nature on a web page, not engaging that type of content on your web page for people with epilepsy. So those are, this is not exhaustive by any means, but it is a place to start to make a website accessible.
So you had mentioned that there are a few standards reference on the DOJ guidance. Have the courts weighed in on what standards the businesses should be complied with?
Yes. So several of the courts mentioned these WCAG guidelines, which are a set of guidelines produced by the Worldwide Web Consortium. And they stand for, I want to get this right, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And we're up to the 2.1 AA standards now, is kind of the benchmark or the hallmark of ADA standards, ADA website standards. So that Robles case came out a couple of years ago, and they mentioned WCAG 2.0. We're now up to 2.1, and they're actually working on 2.2 as we speak today, and those may be out later in 2022. So, and these are the standards that NAR has, suggested based on the courts relying on WCAG standards.
Okay. So there's a lot of technical aspects to this, right? And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I know my website, I know I don't have any flashing content, right? So I know that I don't have that. So I'm good on there. But there's other things on that list that I would need to update on my website. So I don't have it done yet. But if I have a plan in place, would that help protect me from being sued or any kind of liability on that aspect? Or how does that work?
Yeah, that is a great point. So having a plan is very important. And that's one of the, when we wrap up, I've got some best practices for you to share with your participants and subscribers. So as businesses are becoming more aware of the accessibility requirements in the WCAG standards, they are taking steps to make their websites accessible, which now raises the question, is a claimant, a plaintiff, we talked about all those lawsuits, does it make their claim moot? And here again, we have different courts saying different things. So in one instance, I believe it was the Kroger case, the district court said, look, they've completely remediated their website. They have a plan in place that as things change, as new content comes in, as the standards are updated, they have a plan in place that any barriers will continue to be addressed. And they said, yeah, that's a moot point. So in that instance, the court said it's moot. You no longer have a claim because they fixed their website, brought it into compliance. But other courts have said, it's great that you have a plan. However, at the time that the plaintiff accessed the website, it was not accessible. And, if you're in the process of making it accessible, I think that's a great thing. Definitely, talk to your defense counsel, make that, part of your defense if they so recommend. But it may or may not help you in court, I guess, is the bottom line. Because again, different courts are saying different things.
So we've heard that brokerages in several states have received demand letters from attorneys alleging that their websites don't comply with the ADA or Fair Housing Act. What's going on with those, and what should a broker or agent do if they receive such a letter?
Yeah, this is something that NAR has been watching. It started a couple of years ago in Florida with literally hundreds of brokers and agents receiving these letters. It has since spread to states like Massachusetts, California, I believe some in Illinois. So it's still happening in pockets around the country. And what these demand letters are saying is, they're form letters. I've seen a few of them. It seems to be the same, verbiage, sort of cut and pasted from, broker to broker on these demand letters. But basically it says your website isn't compliant with the ADA or the Fair Housing Act. Now, this is a more unique and novel claim that the real estate websites need to be in compliance with the Fair Housing Act. But NAR's position on those Fair Housing Act claims is that they lack any kind of support. There are no provisions in the Federal Fair Housing Act that require real estate brokers to code their websites to be accessible to people with disabilities. Now, again, we're just talking about Fair Housing Act. No court has ever talked about this issue or made a decision on this issue, or that real estate brokers have an obligation under the Fair Housing Act. So these are really sort of unsupported claims that real estate websites need to comply with the FHA. And, we've seen them in terms of basically just trying to get money, kind of a shakedown, if you will. However, like any demand letter that you get from an attorney, do not ignore it. Definitely contact, if you do get one of these letters, definitely contact your legal counsel, contact your insurance company to get a claim started and to assess the best next steps for you and in your website and your business.
Yeah, that sounds like we should be, I guess, complying.
Yeah.
So with accessibility, I mean, what are some of the best practices that we could do that brokers and agents with websites can do to be in compliance, I guess, with this?
Yeah. And this goes back to, kind of creating that plan. So the first step really is to assess your website's current accessibility and to create that plan to address and enhance any accessibility issues. Now, I will say there are some automated, plans out there. There are websites that say, we'll, send our crawler to assess your website. On the DOJ's guidance, they recommend against completely relying on those. They may not be the most reliable. However, there are companies out there that will do ADA website accessibility scans and to determine, where you might need to be more in compliance, what parts are in compliance, what parts aren't, and then help you develop that plan. The next thing really is to talk to your website provider, talk to your website developer to see what parts of your website are accessible. How are they addressing website accessibility? Certainly, as I mentioned before, this is a very technical topic. And the website people, the IT people, they're really in the best position to understand and be able to implement these guidelines in terms of the WCAG. So definitely talk to your website provider. And also talk about ADA website accessibility and indemnification with your contract, with your, with your hosting site, with your website developer, and find out, what the plan is basically to address ADA website accessibility. As I mentioned, talk to a consultant who can help you put a plan together and then prioritize that plan. What should I work on first, and then second, and then third, until you have, your website completely up to standards in terms of the ADA compliance. Next, talk to your insurance carrier. So, you'll see these are kind of things you can do right away, right? Like call your insurance carrier, look at your E&O policy, see if a discrimination claim would be covered, an ADA website accessibility claim would be covered, and then see if they have resources about this, right? Because as we've seen the litigation increase, it's entirely possible that your E&O carrier may have some resources on this, and definitely tap into those. And then finally, this one is really simple. You can put an ADA website accessibility statement on your website. So if you go to nar.realtor.com/accessibility, absolutely copy and paste NAR's accessibility statement, make it so it's, addressing your website and your brokerage or your business, but definitely just go ahead and copy that, because, providing an alternate means of obtaining information is absolutely helpful when it comes to compliance. So definitely go ahead and share that on your website. Make sure your website has that accessibility statement.
Thanks,
Nice.
Dean. Those are incredible tips. And before we let you go, if you don't mind, at the conference, there was a lot of conversation about image copyright and new wave of lawsuits. It seems our industry is being inundated with attorneys coming after us, similar to construction defect 15, 20 years ago. What is happening with image copyright right now with photos and whatnot?
So yes, there's always been, copyright issues. Even back when I was, as it was known then, GLVAR, back in the early 2000s, there have always, to my knowledge, there's always been copyright infringement cases. And it's sort of a constant thing to be mindful of, and to really understand your photography agreement. If you use an outside photographer, what does your agreement say in terms of copyright? Who owns the copyright? How can you, as the purchaser of the photographer services, how can you use those photographs? Does it apply to MLS? So, these are all questions. And I should point out, nar.realtor has several resources on this topic, even sample photography agreements that you can use with your photographer. So definitely, again, it's something to always be mindful of, that, copyright is an important issue when you're talking about images and how they can be used. So definitely look at that, talk to your photographers, look at your agreements, and use NAR sample agreements if you don't have one. And I also want to say, before we wrap up, on the ADA website accessibility, I've got a list of resources that I can email you, offline, and maybe you can add these to your show notes so that people can go look at the resources on nar.realtor.
Well, we appreciate all the help. And if you could send that stuff to us so we can send it out to our brokers, I appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing this morning with us. And hopefully we'll see you in Orlando.
Hope so.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a great day.
Great talking with you. Thank you.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.